I am Colby Sumner, and this is America, Fog of War.
Pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, the struggle to preserve our republic. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of...
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender.
I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of it.
We're told that on his body was found a diary. Under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again for another Hippocket history episode. As always, I am joined by my co-host Brett Thomas. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing awesome, man. Happy to be here, as usual.
As always, man, it's a fun place to be here in the America Fog of War studio.
It's a nice place.
Especially when we're getting ready to talk about a battle like Shiloh. You know, this is one of the few in the Western theater specifically that contend with names like Gettysburg and Antietam and all the very famous battles of the Eastern theater. And obviously that's because of the price tag in bodies that this battle has on it. Now, we went over this in the narrative episode slightly. I mean, I say slightly. I cover it in the narrative episode, but it's more of a bird's eye view. It's more to tell, to progress the story that's being told in the narrative episodes, the main episodes.
Which is what I had before, kind of a bird's eye view.
Right. Today we're going to get down in the mud a little bit. We're going to look at things a lot more detailed than we do in the narrative episodes, so hopefully everybody enjoys this. But to get us started, why don't you set the stage for us, man?
So, setting the stage for the Battle of Shiloh, Grant, he's going to be waiting on the Army of the Ohio, and that's going to be led by Don Carlos Buell.
Right, they're marching down from Nashville.
Right, they're coming a long way. So Grant, he's not at full strength. He's got 5 of his 6 divisions in place, and then there's a 6th division under Lew Wallace, and that's going to be 8 miles downriver, which when I say downriver, it's actually north.
Right, there's a few things like that in the Civil War throughout the country, I guess, that I have kind of noticed specifically from studying the Civil War. You get this with the Tennessee River, but in the Shenandoah Valley, up the valley is going south, and then going down the valley is going north. There's a lot of really confusing things like that.
Yeah, it messes me up pretty bad.
If you're not from the region, you would give yourself away quickly.
Right. So on the morning of the 6th, Grant's going to have just 33,000 men approximately, and he's going to be looking at a Confederate army of approximately 40,000. But he doesn't know it.
Truthfully, in most of these situations, it's pretty rare that when it comes down to the fighting, and I don't mean overall strengths of armies at the time of the battle, I just mean out of the troops that are facing each other on the battlefield, that are actively engaged in a fight, it's very rare that an outnumbered force wins. Even Stonewall Jackson in his Valley campaign that we're going to be talking about a little later on, even though he has a smaller force, if you compare the combined strength of the 3 armies that he's facing in his Valley campaign, through using the strategy of defeating your enemy in detail, which we've talked about before, but that essentially means trying to hit them when they're separated and they can't support each other when they're vulnerable.
Right.
Through doing that, he, out of all of the battles, with the exception of one, ends up having the numerical advantage in those situations. So at the start of this thing, it's not looking so positive for Grant and the Army of the Tennessee, because it's clear that Albert City Johnston has the numerical advantage, and that typically leads to victory, more times than not.
Right. So unknown to Grant, he's got this Confederate force in superior numbers approaching, and he's got to set up. So what he has, Grant's front lines are facing south. The river is to his left. His front lines are going to be stretched 6 miles long from the river. 5 of his 6 divisions, beginning from that river, going westward, there's going to be W.H.L. Wallace's division, Hurlbut's division, Prentiss, McClernand, and Sherman's divisions.
Holding down that right flank.
Oh, yeah, he's going to be all the way out there. I know, you got a thing for him.
That is almost blasphemy coming from a boy that grew up in the South, though. Saying Sherman's my boy. But he is, man. Sherman's incredible. He is considered by many to be like the first of the modern generals, right? The way he conducts warfare is very much in line with a modern general. He understands things like having to attack infrastructure, the means of war, not just the armies that fight the war, but the means by which those armies are capable of fighting, right? The places that clothe those armies, that feed those armies, that arm those armies, right? Those are the things that he realizes you have to hone in on. And he's just now linked up with Grant's army at this point, believe it or not. Actually, after the first Battle of Manassas, he goes through a little bit of a mental break and almost resigns his command and leaves the army.
Really?
But somehow or another, I think it's Grant that convinces him to come join me, come out here and work with me. And thank God he did.
Yeah, because he's the kind of guy you want to have in your corner.
From this point on throughout the rest of the war, this is the most trusted ally he has, the guy that thinks about warfare the same way he does. That's vital in that kind of a situation. So, anyways, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, all is good. On Sunday, April 6th, prior to 6 a.m., Johnston's army had spent the entire night making a camp in the order of battle within 2 miles of the Union camp, just south of Sherman's position, which is going to be right at the Shiloh church.
Right. Honestly, it's kind of crazy. You consider how close 2 miles is. Right, and how much noise an army makes.
Right.
Well,
we got thousands and thousands of people, and going off of that noise, that's a problem because Sherman's men are just kind of in their camp thinking the Confederates are miles and miles south.
Well, it's not everybody, though. It's just the higher command, right? Because Grant and Sherman and the rest of the Union command has been getting reports from various places that they've been spotting Confederates in the area.
But nobody takes that serious.
Right. I mean, we even have a quote here. Grant sends Halleck a telegram, correct?
Right. Halleck, yeah. He receives a telegram from Grant, and Grant says, I have scarcely the faintest idea of an attack being made upon us, but will be prepared such a thing take place.
That's arguable.
It is arguable. I think the guy was always ready, but...
Well, he's ready to fight. I don't know if he had his men ready. It seems like there could have been a little bit more preparation, but he is Ulysses S. Grant, so we'll let him slide on that one.
Yeah, and his right-hand man, Sherman, he also believed the same thing, that there was not a major Confederate force nearby, maybe just skirmishes and small pockets of them, like you had said before. But when Colonel Jesse Appler of the 53rd Ohio warned Sherman that an attack was imminent, his response was not a nice response. He said, take your damned regiment back to Ohio. There are no Confederates closer than Corinth.
Listen, and I could imagine that sounded pretty aggressive. It gives me the feeling that in Sherman's mind, Jesse Appler, this colonel with the 53rd Ohio, in Sherman's mind, he's almost making them out to be cowards, right? Like they're scared of a fight. They're seeing the boogeyman in the woods, you know?
Right, but this guy's out here like, hey, I'm your eyes and ears.
I'm telling you.
I'm telling you what I see. It's imminent, and they could be coming any moment. So,
well, that takes us in to the morning of the fight. Now, there is a big misconception among your, let's say, weekend warrior Civil War buffs, the people that aren't hardcore Civil War nerds. That there's a misconception that Grant and Sherman and everybody else are so surprised by this Confederate attack that guys are getting killed and charged when they're still sleeping in their tents. And that's actually not the case. And that's due to the actions of a quite junior officer comparatively to who we're talking about here. But around 3 a.m., a colonel, his name is Everett Peabody. He's one of General Prentice's brigade commanders. He's actually going to send out a patrol of 250 men for that reason alone. He's been getting these reports that, hey, there's Confederates in the area, and worried about that and feeling, hey, man, there's a really big chance that we might just be getting snuck up on right now. He sends out this patrol. Their job is to go out and see if what they've been getting reports on is true.
Good on them.
Good on them. You hear sometimes, at least in the Marine Corps, a lot of junior guys will try to make a decision with some initiative, you know. They end up, because of their inexperience, making the wrong decision. So you'll hear, what's the phrase I'm getting ready to say right now?
Good initiative, bad judgment.
Exactly. It's like the most backhanded compliment you've ever gotten in your life, especially in that setting. You're like, well, crap, man.
Yeah.
You know, I've been told that. I've been told that before.
Yeah.
And anyways, this Colonel Peabody, he had good initiative and good judgment, right? He's making the right decision in this case. Now, this patrol is going to be led by a major. His name is James Powell. And not long after leaving the safety of federal lines, they're going to run into Confederates. They're going to have a little bit of an exchange with those Confederates, but those Confederates are going to turn around and flee into the woods. Right, so they're still a little uncertain.
Trying to draw them in, I bet.
Well, maybe, but also those Confederates might not know if that's the full Union Army either. I don't really know the ins and outs to that level of what's going on here.
Yeah, good point.
I just know how it's playing out. At least from the Union perspective and from Major Powell's perspective, he doesn't know if what he is seeing, these Confederates, he doesn't know if that's just some random patrol or some partisan guys fighting on behalf of the Confederate. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what he's seeing, or if it's in fact, skirmishers for the entire Confederate Army in the Western Theater.
Right.
So they're going to continue on, and a short time later, this is sometime around 5 a.m., they're going to encounter Confederate outposts, and they are going to start engaging with those Confederate outposts, and that fight's going to last around an hour. Now, the one thing that this does that benefits everybody back in Grant's line, back in their camps, it's still early in the morning, and I know you wake up early in the military, but there's a lot of guys probably still in bed at this point, right? 5 a.m. in the morning, and you're out in the field.
Of course.
There's a lot of guys that might still be sleeping. Well, this skirmish that Major Powell and these Confederate outposts are having back and forth is going to warn the Union troops back in that line, back in the camps around Pittsburgh Landing.
And they're all like new guys, too.
Let's think about this. The ones that are experienced have only really been in 2 fights. Well, actually, in all honesty, 1 fight, because they didn't really fight at Fort Henry.
Right.
They did some fighting at Fort Donelson, but that's about it, right? Outside of that, that's the extent of their combat experience. Well, these troops back in line are going to hear this, and they're going to start getting ready. They're going to start grabbing their weapons. They're going to start getting in line, like the lines of battle, and preparing for what they hear coming their way.
That's got to be what a feeling. Just go condition 1. Here we go.
You can hear it coming. It's just like us and the smoke signals in Afghanistan. There's always some kind of ominous warning that crap's getting ready to go down.
Just below the surface of awareness.
All that being said, Prentiss at this point is still under the impression that that's not the case. Now, Prentiss is, again, the division commander of Peabody, the guy who sent out this patrol. Right?
Okay.
Colonel Peabody. When Prentiss finds out that Peabody sent out that patrol, he's going to be outraged. He's going to accuse that colonel of provoking a major engagement, essentially a full-on battle, right? Because Grant's orders up to this point are, do not do that. Do not bring on a full-scale engagement with the Confederates, if you can.
If
right?
you can, because he's not at full strength, right?
Right, he's still waiting on a ton of reinforcements to show up. Soon, however, and very soon, Prentiss is going to realize it's not that his guys went and picked a fight. He's facing an assault, and that assault is being conducted by, again, the entire Confederate Army in this theater of operations. So he's going to also rush to prepare his men to get into the fight as well. Now, at about 9 a.m., Union forces are either fully engaged in fighting with Confederates, or they're moving towards the section of the line that they've been assigned to engage with Confederates.
Right.
So by 9 a.m., this thing is up and running. And right from the get-go, it's just so everybody knows, it's going to hit first on the right side of that line. I believe that Sherman's division is going to be one of the first divisions that has contact with Confederates. And that's, again, because the Confederates are approaching from that Corinth Road, which Sherman's basically camped on, right? And that Corinth Road runs north to south in the direction of Sherman's division. Now, just so everybody knows, Grant's Army of the Tennessee is organized by divisions, right? He's got 6 division commanders with 6 divisions. One of those divisions is further north at Crump's Landing. Yeah. But he's organized his army in divisions. The Army of Mississippi, which is under the command of Albert Sidney Johnston, is going to be organized first into corps, right? And there's 4 corps. You've got Leonidas Polk commanding one of those corps, Braxton Bragg commanding another. You've got William Hardy commanding a corps, and then commanding the Reserve Corps, so that the reserve infantry. Every battle commander needs to have some forces in reserve.
Have to have it.
That Reserve Corps is going to be commanded by John C. Breckinridge. Now, Johnston's strategy is to emphasize the attack on the right flank, right? Because his goal in the end is to push Grant away from the Tennessee River. And the reason he wants to do that is pretty obvious if you give it a little thought. He wants to cut Grant off from being reinforced by the Army of the Ohio.
Yep.
Right? Because if he gets those reinforcements, the numerical advantage shifts to Grant.
Right.
The other thing is resupplies. Things like ammunition, food, water, medical supplies, all these things, his access to that is the Tennessee River. And if Johnston can push Grant and the Army of the Tennessee away from the river, he's just cut that off. And that's a huge deal. I mean, Grant at that point would have had, 2 options. Fight until everybody is either killed or captured or surrendered or whatever the case is, or turn around and march north, being harassed the entire way by the Army of the Mississippi.
Right.
And probably losing a substantial amount of guys in the process.
And they have the element of surprise, too,
Right,
so that's
right.
kind of a big deal.
Right, and momentum is a thing. I mean, momentum is a real thing on a battlefield. It's intangible, but it's almost tangible. You can almost feel it, you know?
Right.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, make sure you never miss new ones by subscribing to the show on your podcast app of choice. And if you want to help us out with growing the show and enable us to bring you better content and more of it, then Brett and I ask you leave us a 5-star rating and a review. They really go a long way in helping us out. Stay up to date with everything from America Fog of War by connecting with us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. As always, Brett and I thank you for listening, and until next time, stay frosty.